Your time is here. You get to finally talk about your
Oh,
game.
I almost don't know if I want
Try
to.
not to. We don't need to spend too much saying this. How long have you played?
So I have played, I think, 10
About
hours.
10 hours.
And I think this is where I'm having a bit of a hard time gauging my experience with it because I used to very much be in the camp, and I think I've said this before. If a game takes more than 10 hours to get good, it's not a good game. I feel like I first came to that realization when I was like Final Fantasy 13. Like I played that game for like 12, 13 hours and felt like I was beating my head against a wall. And everybody was telling me, just get to hour 14 or wherever and it opens up. And I'm like, that's not a good game.
Just
If I
get
gotta
good.
fight through all that. Yeah. And I'm kind of feeling that with this game. The first 10 hours have not been bad. It's been very slow for me, for better for worse. And some people like a slow burn at the beginning. I'm not so sure how I'm feeling about it. I do feel like this is one of those games that if I do stick it out, like Bethesda games always get their hooks in me at some point. So I think once the systems finally evolve just a little bit and I get a little more engaged with things, I think my overall feeling towards it will change. So I guess what I'm going back on here is a game can sometimes take longer than 10 to 12 hours to quote unquote get good, but I can certainly understand how for many these first 10 hours are going to turn you off real quick.
Hmm.
I think part of it, I've been trying to think of the best way to even phrase this because I think a lot of people were coming into this game were thinking that, oh, this is just going to be Skyrim in space,
That's what I
right?
was going to
Or
ask
Fallout in
you
space.
whenever you pause. I was gonna be like, so
And
is it Skyrim or Fallout in space, or does it feel like its
okay,
own thing?
oh, okay. Let me explain kind of where I'm at with this because I'll tell you a lot of it's just hard to gauge here. So a lot of people are looking at that from a negative context, Skyrim in space. I honestly was looking at that in a positive light.
That's one of the best games ever. Like, yeah,
My expectations for this game weren't way up here. We had talked about this prior. Like I know Bethesda and Microsoft were touting this as the most important RPG ever made, which I think was a terrible way to market it. And a lot of people were also hyping it up to like these extreme levels. I never got to that point. I think I had relatively realistic expectations that this is Bethesda. I played plenty of Bethesda games. It's going to be a Bethesda game probably through and through for better or for worse. And I was like, if I got Skyrim in space, if that was the bare minimum bar I was trying to meet, I'm more than happy with that. It doesn't feel like Skyrim or Fallout in space yet. I think part of that though is not that the systems and the gameplay isn't similar to those other games. It's the personality that this game has right now. So this game went for a very kind of realistic take on sci-fi, right? It's very much like if we were able to in the next 200 years make it to space with our current technology and our understanding of space and whatnot, it's not fantastical, right? You think about Skyrim, it's fantasy. And that I think is very easy to get drawn into initially. There's a spectacle to it. You got powers. And also because Skyrim, you had the entire Elder Scrolls IP to build upon, so you already kind of understood what that game was going to be. Same thing with Fallout. Like it's not fantasy, but it had that weird kind of quirkiness, personality to it. It wasn't grounded fully on realism, right?
well, that
So
is
I think
interesting
those are really
because
easy to get drawn into.
as I say, that is interesting. You're saying because I prefer Elder Scrolls over Fallout. So I
Yeah,
would
and I
hope
mean,
for
however you look at it,
Skyrim in space. Yeah.
I don't. It probably leans, if anything, more Fallout, but I'm
Mm.
hesitant to even say that because Fallout has a very like dystopian feel to it. It's very kind of dark humory. Like this game doesn't come at you really strong with those quirky personality traits. It is very realistic and almost. I'm probably not doing this game justice by saying this, but it feels a little bland in some cases. Here's the
Mm.
thing: space can be space can be done a few ways. Like you have the fantastical space games like Mass Effect, right? Where it's like you got a little bit of space magic going on, but you also have like these crazy alien political systems to kind of engage with. Or you have like Destiny where you're straight up a space wizard, right? So you have these really high level fantasy elements in space to kind of jazz it up a little bit. When you think about space in just a very realistic context,
It's
it
boring.
can be kind of
Yeah.
and that's what certain systems feel like right now. Space is empty in this game. And there's also not a whole lot of space traversal. Like you can technically, I think, fly through space. You will not want to fly through space. It's basically a map you're going to jump
There's
around
no
between.
space wizards that are looking to take over the galactic empire.
Not that I've come across. To my understanding, there are a few fantasy-like elements that happen. I've been trying to avoid spoilers, so I don't know any specifics, but I think you get a little bit of that, but it's nowhere in the early game. I'm curious if it's even in the mid game. So it's very much just straight up. You have a standard spaceship. You're blasting
Hmm.
off into space with your jetpack kind of stuff. Like I don't know. So you don't have the fantasy element. So if that turns you off, or you're looking for that, you're going to be
That
missing
is a
that
little.
element
That
a
is a
little
little
bit.
bit of a stinger, I think.
Um, I'm trying not to come at this real negative because I don't think this is a bad game. I don't think it's gonna be a bad game, but it's a slow burn. The space aspect of it, if
Whoa,
anything,
this
has kind
place
of
looks like.
weighed it down for me.
Did you see that? That place looked like the Citadel
Hmm.
just now.
Yeah, yeah. One of the first cities you get to looks like the Citadel
Huh.
stylistically, but not as good. I like the Citadel better. I think it was more interesting the way it was set up. I think that's my thing. I played a lot of good space RPGs, and this game isn't hitting some of those same check boxes just yet. Not saying it has to. I mean, this game definitely has more in the way of like faction systems and things of that nature, and I'm just finally starting to get into some of that. It takes forever to get into anything. Like I've only done like one main story mission, and I've just kind of started one faction side quest. And once again, that's taken me 10 hours. It's a slow burn.
Well,
Um,
I, I did. The
You're
one
not
thing
selling me on this game at all, buddy.
sorry.
there's one thing I didn't want to bring up because I don't think it's a spoiler, but I did read there is a specific way that most people are saying you should approach the
You're talking about
story.
play through the main story first and then do
Yes,
everything else
that's
after.
what I've
I
read that people are saying you
I'm
should
not sure if
do.
I like
Now that's
I
not the
get why
most
they're
fun
saying that.
way, but people are saying because you get most of your XP through the main quest lines. So people are saying by doing that you're more leveled up for side quests and stuff, so it makes those more fun. Now again, I haven't played it, so
I've
Well,
heard
I
both
can
arguments
try.
here. I heard a lot of people say that at first, and now I hear people saying that you shouldn't do that. And here's the thing, you should play this game however you want to play it.
this is the kind
I'm
of
not
game
really
where
feeling like that.
going off the beaten path, that's like the point of Bethesda games in my opinion. So
Yeah, I don't want to rush to the main. I think the whole point is the new game plus in this particular game isn't like iterative, like you just play the same game again. It's additive, so something changes next time. So the argument I heard is that if you rush through it right now and then you get to the new game plus, since you didn't play a lot of the original content, you're not going to really see what got changed. So
mm,
it's not going to have that impact. Now, I've also heard that that only applies to main story missions versus side missions. Like, I don't know. Point is, play this game however you want. I don't really want to rush through main story stuff just yet. I do want to dig into the factions, some of the side quests. I don't think I'm going to 100% it or anything first time. I don't know. I am wanting to really like this game, and I am wanting to get back into it. I'm feeling certain systems start to hook me in, but it's a little slow. The menu system, man, is rough. Like
UI,
working
the
through
UI,
yeah, because they went with this very like super minimal aesthetic. Like all the text is
it's
just
white.
super like thin font text. It's for me, it's hard to read, especially when I'm trying to like, pick up items in the world. Like everything just looks the same. It's hard to read what
Because
an
you're playing
important
on a
item is
projector
because
too.
well,
I
what I
mean, you
mean
have a
by
nice
that is like
projector.
everything is so realistic that the important stuff doesn't stand out. It kind of just blends into the background a little bit. When you hover over something, it just brings up a little inventory list. You know how like Fallout does, and it's just all white text. Not a whole lot's popping out. And there's a few color changes based upon rarity of gear in there, but I don't know. I just haven't really dug into that system just yet. One thing I am disappointed with, and I don't think this is going to change. I think I mentioned this in some of our pre-conversations. So this game does have alien life in terms of like flora and fauna.
No
Where
intelligence.
are the
Yeah.
yeah, where are the straight up aliens? Like I really don't like that they went this path. Like I feel there's two paths you could go here. You could be super realistic and be like, okay, there are no aliens. If that's the perspective you take, because that's a stance that people believe in. There's no alien life, and that's fine. But once you go down the path of there is some form of alien life, you need to go all in on that because it doesn't make sense to just have alien animals, like, and not alien like I'm not saying humanoid, but higher level intelligent life. Like that would have breathed so much more life into this game if there were like other alien races to interact with, like a Mass Effect style thing. Everything has been human so far. All the aliens have just been
You can't
monsters
make love
and
to any alien species
yeah,
out there.
not that that was on my checklist, but I don't know. I find that really just disappointing and kind of an odd stance. Like, okay, you want to be realistic, but you've already set up this world where you've got alien life. lean into that.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that was they didn't want to, but they have other like they're big on having other races, right? I mean, you look at Fallout, you look at Elder Scrolls, like they're full of other races like mutants and
Well, it's gonna be
Khajiit and all this kind of.
it's gonna be a long time before you see the next Elder Scrolls game. So I bet you
Oh yeah,
maybe they'll save some sort of first contact for like DLC or something. Like that would be a great
maybe.
DLC, first contact with some that's always super typical of a space game. It's like the first time we've met
I would
the
hope
the
so. It,
Gorbulites. I don't know.
the Gorbulites. I said maybe somewhere else in this game that happens. Like I said, I'm 10 hours in. To my understanding, there's a lot of game here. Like most people don't get anywhere near the end between 60 and 80 hours just to get to the end of the main stuff, unless you're rushing through it, which I'm okay spending time in this game. I'm hoping it really picks up. There's some tedious stuff here. So I'm not trying to turn you off to it. Just be expectant. It may not grab you in the first 10 hours immediately. It might be one of those things that's going to take 15, 20 hours for the systems to hook themselves in.
One question,
Um,
one
yeah,
other thing I have is I love when I play RPGs. One of my favorite things is listening to good music. Does it have good music or is it very quiet?
I'm trying to think. It has not stood out. Like
It's
it has their overture kind of stuff, like the Starfield, orchestrated theme is there sometimes. I don't feel like there's a lot beyond
because like
that.
when walking around the Citadel, I have a blast with the music. When walking around the Wasteland, you have a blast with all the retro
I
music.
don't.
Elder
I have
Scrolls
not felt
has
that
its
way yet.
like violin and old school.
That's not good.
That's not good. So it's boring
It's
and there's no
Yeah.
just
music.
empty flora, fauna, lame. Oh boy.
No alien.
I'm trying really hard not to come across
Oh boy.
super negative here because I that's not quite my stance on it yet. I'm kind of just neutral. Like I am still optimistic that it's going to get to that point where things kind of click over and I'm getting kind of those old school Bethesda vibes where it's got you in, you're digging into the systems, the faction stuff is good. I am starting to get into this pirate faction quest that has got some cool stuff happening, but I don't know. The companions right now aren't crazy interesting. I'll tell you, I've been mentally comparing this game a lot to Outer Worlds lately because that
Mm.
was the Obsidian kind of
I
similar-ish
enjoyed
game.
Outer Worlds.
Like I know the big critique with Outer Worlds is the scope of it, which is super narrow, right? It wasn't this expansive thing, a lot of lost potential, blah 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 blah. But when I look at it as in comparison to something like Starfield, I kind of liked Outer Worlds better. It had more, maybe you could look at these as gimmicky things, but it had some pizzazz to pull you in, right? The worlds were a little more interesting to look at. The storyline was a little more quirky. Your companions were a little more over the top. And maybe that's not what people want here. They very much are going for realism, but realism can get boring. A lot of these planets you go to, there is nothing there. Like literally nothing. It's you go and you scan some resources, shoot some animals, and get off the planet. The handcrafted stuff is pretty good. Like the actual quests that you go and you do are fine, but the procedural stuff, there's not much there, man. Yeah, I'm early. I could be very wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but
They haven't
I
learned
don't
anything
know
from
yet.
No Man's. They haven't learned anything from the early No Man's Sky stuff yet.
Well,
Like
to be fair, No
you,
Man's Sky didn't have a lot of handcrafted content, and this does. And there is more story narrative driven stuff here, and everybody that I've seen any comment from has said the main story, when you get into it, is really kind of spectacular, especially towards the end. There's some really cool stuff that happens. So I just got to see it through. But I can certainly understand that if you are feeling bored in this game 10, 15 hours in, I wouldn't feel bad about it. I mean, yeah, you might be missing out on some great ending, but I still kind of come back to that thing like if a game doesn't hook you in 10 to 15 hours, it's kind of the game's fault. I mean, people want different things out of a game. Some people are okay with a nice slow burn, but this game is not going to be for
Mm.
everybody. You have to fight
Um,
through a little bit of tedious to get there.
the only other thing I'm curious about is the whole uh is the whole the whole idea of it's not seamless landing on a planet. Does that tend to take you out a little bit, or is that just
Yes.
yeah?
Yeah, I tell you, and this is gonna probably be the most danging comment I could make, but space feels like I wish it wasn't even a part of this game because
Mm.
every time I do something space oriented, taking off from a planet or whatever, I feel like it just slows me down.
Hmm.
Like I don't get to get in my ship and just take off on the planet. I don't have that seamless transition. It's you get into your spaceship, you say take off, loading scene. You can't skip these cutscenes either of your ship getting up, blasting into space. So then you're sitting in space. You can't do anything in space. Like so you can fly around. There's no point to flying around really. Like you can't go fly and land on a planet. You can look at the planet through your scanner, like it's in your viewport, and you can just click it and fast travel to it. You could fly over to it, but you still at some point have to click on the planet to land on it. So flying to it does no benefit. You have space combat, which is fine. I'm not in love with it yet. Maybe it's because my ship sucks. I don't know. But when getting around in space, it's a series of you go to your star map, find a planet, teleport there, next planet, teleport. It's just teleporting through maps. So being in space slows me down more than anything else. I'd rather just be like, go from planet, say, I want to end up on this other planet, completely bypass space and just be on the other planet. That's kind of how Outer Worlds was to a certain point. Like you could go to your ship and your ship was like a hub and you could do a few things in the hub, talk with your crew, stuff like that, and then pick, okay, go land on a planet. It felt a lot quicker doing that. I don't know. I know I'm coming across super negative with that, and I'm hoping that the space aspect gets some more oomph after a while. But for me, space is empty in this, which is very realistic. Kudos to Bethesda for sticking to realism, but it's a little boring. Sorry.
No. Well, I officially play the game tomorrow night, so we'll see. We'll see.
And maybe you'll have a different experience. I hope you will. I do think this is one of those games too. You get out of it what you put into it as far as how you build your character, where you go in the game. Maybe I spent too much time doing some side quests, and I should have did some more main quests. Maybe I've just approached this game in a way that maybe isn't the most, I don't know, exciting path I could have taken. But I don't know. I'm very curious to see what your take is going to be.
Interesting.
Oh, the other thing I will say, you're going to play it on PC, right?
Probably.
Yeah, the 30 frames is killing it for me on Xbox.
Really? Okay.
I mean,
it's free on
it doesn't
PC
run
Game
bad.
Pass, right? It's on PC
I
Game
think so.
Pass.
I think if you have Game Pass, yeah,
Okay.
it's included on that.
Cool.
The 30 frames, especially for, I think that would help. If this game at least looked and felt really cool to move around in space, I think that would help a lot.
Because I've read,
but it feels extra clunky in 30 frames.
I've read people say the 30 frames isn't a big deal. I don't know.
For me, it does. Maybe because I'm also, maybe it depends on your screen, your TV, your resolution. Maybe if you're watching it in 4K, I'm on a big projector on 1080, so maybe I'm noticing like the lack of fidelity there. So like the smoothness usually helps. Like, usually I don't mind being on 1080 projector because it's 60 frames, it's fluid enough that the little nuanced fidelity issues like resolution doesn't really bother me too much. I could play it on my 4K, and maybe I will. Maybe that will change my experience if I go play in the living room, but I don't know. I'm wishing it was 60 frames. So yeah, if you got it on PC and you can have a machine that can run it, go for it. I also don't know why it isn't 60 frames. I'm kind of ranting now, but I feel like the Xbox X should be powerful. This game, in the scope that I've seen it in thus far, does not scream like it's a game that shouldn't be able to run in 60 frames, considering that I have played more recent games of larger scale that have been. So I don't know. I don't know their engine. I know game dev hard, et cetera, but they need a performance mode or something. Give me 60 frames.
Interesting. Well, at least that means by next episode I'll be able to counteract any points you may have, or maybe I'll hate it.
I hope I'm wrong.
Anywho. Alright, so